Hello, I'm Brandon Martini, a commercial pilot and flight instructor.
And I'm Carson Vasquez. I'm a private pilot.
And you're listening to the Aviation Mentors podcast, sponsored by Stratus Financial.
So buckle up, because the Aviation Mentors are taking off.
Hey everyone, welcome again to another episode of the Aviation Mentors podcast. Today we've got a really special guest with us, a great friend of mine named Mike Harris. Thanks for being with us, Mike.
Hey, absolutely, Brandon. Glad to be here. We're, of course, right when we start recording, the gas golf cart starts firing up right behind us, so we get that and background noise. But that's what happens when you're staying at Sun and Fun recording podcasts.
Exactly. We were just doing an episode, me, Carson, and Damaris a few minutes ago with that PBY Catalina, and of course, like fake bombs go off in the background, so anything can change it all, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But part of the fun of doing the podcast in the field at the events is some of the background noise. So this time we got golf carts. Maybe we'll get some airplanes too, not just golf carts.
Yeah, let's hope so. Airplanes are much more interesting than a golf cart. Even though I've seen a couple golf carts here that are pretty killer to look at. I mean, lifted, 4x4 type of thing. Pretty cool stuff.
Yep. I saw one looks like a Jeep Wrangler, which was pretty cool.
Oh, that's even better. But enough about golf carts. We're here about airplanes. So first off, I met Mike. We just calculated kind of right before we started recording. It sounds like we've known each other for about 7 years now, and It's gone by like crazy fast. The funny thing, I met Mike because I got really into podcasts. I was listening to everybody's podcast that I could, and Mike had this podcast, and he still has it today, and we'll talk about it in a minute, called Why We Fly Podcast. And it was one of my favorite podcasts. I'd listen to it all the time, and I just sent him an email, and I was like, I wonder if this aviation personality will even talk to me. I was like all nervous about it. It was pretty funny. And then
because I was like a whopping 15 episodes, of my little podcast, and I think Brandon and 3 other people were the only people listening at that time. So, Brandon and my mom, like my only listeners.
Yeah. So I reached out, I sent him an email, and he said, "Oh yeah, just shoot me a text," and we talked. And I told him I was going to Oshkosh, and I want to meet up. If he's going to go to Oshkosh, I want to talk about his podcast, and if he wanted anybody on it, I want to be on the podcast. It was like a dream of mine at that time. And Mike was like, I'm not going, but if you want to record an episode, I'll splice it together. And I was like, how do I record it? He said, well, it's pretty new for me too, so just use your iPhone, I guess. And I was like, fine, I'll just use my iPhone. And he had me record, I think, 2 podcasts. I did 2 days at Oshkosh, and it was just a blast.
You said that was Oshkosh 2016, right?
Yeah, it had to be Oshkosh 2016 or 17, but I'm pretty sure 16.
I think it's 16. And that year was the first year I went to Sun and Fun, and I didn't go to Oshkosh that year. But then every year since, I've been to both.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, this is only my second Sun and Fun, by the way. Last time I came with Austin by myself in, I think, 2014 or 2015. Yeah. And I have to say, I love Sun and Fun, except for the humidity is still killing me a little bit. So
yeah, it's rough.
I know you're from the South, so it might not be as bad, but us from Southern California, we're like, anything changes besides anything from 72 and sun shining is just too much for us. So, but yeah, so I recorded these 2 episodes for Mike, and I was lucky enough. He put them both up like within a week, and I was super excited. So once we had the podcast going for Aviation Mentors, I was like, I got to have Mike on this podcast. And I can't believe it. We're already like 56 or 57 episodes in, and finally we're getting you on the podcast. So it's been a while.
That's awesome. Yeah. And my podcast, it's funny because you and I have both had some similar journeys in aviation. Like we were both into aviation and private pilots. And I started the podcast long before I was working in aviation professionally. And both you and I kind of did the same thing. We left our previous careers and went into aviation full time professionally. Me just a year ago, and you many years ago, but it was after I met you. So I met you and when you were not in aviation full time, but you were a pilot, you loved airplanes, and that's kind of where I was too, especially when I started the podcast. I was a private pilot, maybe a couple 100 hours, and I just bought my first airplane, which is a Piper Tri-Pacer that I still have now. And I started the podcast then really just as a way to talk about airplanes more. And it started opening doors, and meeting people is so much fun through the podcast. So I've had all these years, and I was doing, 2 episodes a month for a long time, and then kind of sometimes got away from that. And then the last couple of years, especially since the pandemic hit, the podcast kind of took a back seat, and I wasn't recording and publishing episodes. But then a lot of other things changed. I left my long-term career that I had in corporate sales, a 17-year career with Enterprise, a year ago, and started working in aviation full time, kind of like you did. You're one of the many people that I know that have done that, and inspired me to really pursue my passion too. Because turned 40 years old, knew I wasn't getting any younger, and I just didn't want to spend the rest of my career working years not in aviation, and because it was always so hard to juggle the aviation passion with a non-aviation career and then family. It's just so much, and it's always aviation I wasn't getting to do near as much of. So a year ago, I took a sales job with a company in the Nashville area, which is where I already lived, a company named Forge Flight Works, and then recently relaunched and rebranded the podcast Why We Fly by Forge Flight Works. So still Why We Fly, but now it's Why We Fly by Forge Flight Works. I'm sales rep for Forge. We've been an avionics installer for 40 years. We were previously named Carpenter Avionics, and we changed our name about a year and a half ago because we were expanding beyond just avionics. We started an aircraft interiors division, and we've been here at Sun 'n Fun. We're exhibiting as a company for the first time, and we're talking to people about interiors. Like 9 out of 10 people want to talk about interiors. So we're talking about interiors like crazy. But we're also the largest Garmin dealer in Tennessee. So we do Garmin, Dynon, Aspen, Avidyne. We can do anything on the avionics side, and also avionics service. We have bench check capabilities on all kinds of old avionics. So we do a lot of service work where we fix old autopilots and that kind of stuff, and old radios if it's worthwhile. And if it's not worthwhile, we can install a new one for you. And so that's what we've been doing, avionics, for all this time. And we started an aircraft interiors division, and we just finished our first full interior. We've done a few projects. We partnered with a very high-end hot rod shop called Speed and Design. It's in the Nashville area. And we got wind that he was doing hot rods the last 15 years and just incredible work. These are like competition show cars that he sends to SEMA. He's been on the cover of Hot Rod Magazine. Just an absolute craftsman. And he had a couple of his hot rod customers. There's our pyrotechnics for the sound effects. A couple of his hot rod customers had airplanes, and they had him do their airplanes. So he did the Citation and one or two Cessna 310, and that's how we got wind of him. And then we partnered with him, kind of contracted a couple interior jobs, and then it was going well, and so we brought him in full time in house with his 2 employees. So now we have 3 very experienced interior. Just absolute artisans with what they can do, and now they're doing full-time aircraft interiors because he'd kind of climbed the mountain and accomplished what he wanted to accomplish in hot rods and wanted a new challenge, and that for him was aviation. He had an aviation background as well. Gil Vigil, our director of interiors, he used to be a flight officer in law enforcement on a helicopter, and so now he's doing full-time interiors in our shop, and we just delivered to our customer this week while we're at Sun 'n Fun. The customer picked up the Saratoga PA-32. We did a new interior in, and it is gorgeous. It is absolutely gorgeous, all custom, amazing interior. And we're an FAA Part 145 repair station. We always have been with the avionics side, so that gives us the ability to do some interior stuff that other interiors shops can't necessarily do, because we have a chief inspector who's an ANPIA. We can do get things approved. We've gotten things burn certified, some different materials that we want to use that weren't certified. And so we have the ability to do that kind of stuff and really make an interior anything anybody wants. The only thing we're not good at interiors is being the cheapest, because we are not the cheapest by far. There's definitely cheap ways to get a refresh on your interior. There's some prefab kits and stuff you can do yourself. That's not who we are. We're more the shop that, if you want the best interior you can get in an aircraft, better than really is even normal in general aviation, that's what we can do. If you want your airplane to look like your Maserati, like, we can do it all day long. These aircraft projects are coming out much better than they looked coming from the factory, and just it's awesome. So it's very exciting. We're growing that division quickly. We've already done the Saratoga. We've got a Baron that just got dropped off for its interior. We've got a Mooney coming, a Cessna 421 and Cessna 206. But we can work on anything, but we're definitely going to be doing lots of 6-seat aircraft and twins, and probably within a year we'll be doing business jets as well, because we've already got some traction on getting into business jets also. So so that's what I'm doing now. So I made that leap, and so now I keep my tri-pacer at my office and hangars, and I go fly at lunchtime, which is pretty awesome. So
yeah, that's pretty killer. I know that you showed Damaris and I the whole facility all the way back in June. It was when we went out there for Austin's event. He did Space Camp.
Yep.
We went out there for space camp. So we got to see that whole office and whole facility. And it is beautiful, by the way. So if anybody goes over there to New Smyrna Airport in Tennessee, you got to go check it out. It's a really beautiful place. And I'm going to volunteer Mike to give you a tour because he said anybody who wants to come down, right?
Absolutely.
But the aircraft interiors, they showed me some of the stuff that was being done last year, and it is beautiful. He's right. I've seen it in person. I've now seen pictures of that PA-32 that they did. It looks really, really good. If you want quality, they're definitely providing it. And I know cheap is not the way that I like to do things. I want it done once, and I want it done right. And, something fast is coming by, or big. So that's what we get. We get jet noise finally. No more golf carts, right? So, well, awesome, Mike. Thank you so much. And where can everybody find you if they want to reach out to you besides at Forge FlightWorks and New Smyrna Airport? How about for your podcast and whatnot?
Yeah, so the podcast is whywefly.org. You can find the podcast, just type in Why We Fly in any of the normal podcast sources. And the podcast is really, closer in line with the mission of your podcast. It's really all about encouraging people to fly. I mean, that's why it's Why We Fly. It's to share the inspiration of flying. So sometimes the podcast is me talking about the kind of flying I do. Sometimes it's me interviewing a space shuttle pilot or a Blue Angel, and sometimes it's me interviewing a rusty pilot who went from a rusty pilot to now an IFR certified pilot with their own airplane. So it's all about what we love to do with airplanes and what are the stories and the favorite flights and the favorite airplanes, the experiences that we get to enjoy with airplanes. So it's all about inspiring people to become pilots, inspiring people to start their flight training. I put that podcast together it's entertainment for pilots, but I want it to be approachable and inspiring to non-pilots. So I encourage the listeners in every episode to share it with non-pilots. So I want it to be a resource to share it with that neighbor, that coworker, that cousin or niece or nephew that doesn't know much about aviation. They want a way to learn what you can do with an airplane, because honestly, I didn't know. That was kind of my story. I didn't know what you could do with a small airplane. Like I'd ridden on airliners and whatnot, but I didn't really know what the pilot lifestyle was all about. I didn't know that you could own a small single engine airplane for a reasonable amount of money, and that airplane can take you to the Caribbean, or all of the United States. And I travel in my little tri-pacer. My dad and I went to Key West during the pandemic, and wow. We go all over, and I didn't know that when I was younger, that you could do that. I didn't know anything about that general aviation, that kind of private aviation. So I wanted the podcast to be a source of information and inspiration for people that don't know what it's like to be a pilot and why you should learn to be to get your flight training done. Because so many people, they think flight training is only for aspiring airline pilots, and it's just not true. You get your private pilot license, you buy a little airplane or get in a club with an airplane or something, and you can just do so much with it. It's so cool and so much fun. Whether it's just flying around locally for a pancake breakfast on a Saturday, or putting your whole airplane in the whole family in the airplane for spring break and going to Daytona Beach. So there's just so much you can do, and there's so much good, fun things I've been able to share through the podcast, and it's open doors, because it's part of why I am where I am now with getting a job in sales in aviation, because it was something I was doing in aviation as a side hobby, but it really became a business. I became sponsored by Bose and sponsored by National Flight Training, and now sponsored by Forge FlightWorks, my company. So it's been cool, and that's where the podcast is. I also have a Facebook group called Why We Fly Flight Crew. And then, like I said, you can find the podcast everywhere. And then forgeflightworks.com is our website. And you can, our phone number's on the website, and my email as well. So, if anybody is interested in avionics or interior work, we're in Nashville, Tennessee, and there's a lot of places that you can get via plane, get to Nashville pretty easily. So, we'll be happy to help them out.
Awesome. Well, I know we'll be stopping in, and I know it's been so long, but we still have not flown together. I just realized right now. We have not flown in an airplane together. Last time when you came out to California, we were talking about it, going to Catalina, but we didn't end up getting it done. So we gotta figure that out one of these days for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And you're doing all this cool flying all the time, and I'm not. If you never come to Nashville, take me anywhere, man. Come on.
I know. And we've even stopped, and when Damaris and I was ferrying the Piper Lance that one time, we stopped by and we met you for for a beer in downtown, and we still didn't fly that time either. So we'll make it happen one of these times for sure. But Mike, thanks again for being on the podcast, and with all the golf carts and with all the airplanes and fake bombs going off, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, Brandon, and good luck with what you're doing. Love what you're doing the podcast and Stratus Financial. You're making it easier for people to get their flight training, and that's awesome. It's a needed thing, and that's why it's been popular. I think is because it's needed. There's not a lot of great options that were there before, so it's a good opportunity, and I think you're enabling people to pursue their dreams and their passion, which is just incredible. It's awesome.
We're trying real hard. So, Mike, thanks again. I hope you have a great one. Take care. As always, if you want to reach out to either one of us, you can reach us at Twitter or Instagram. You can reach me at Mr. Martini Guy, or you can reach Carson at Carson_AV17. And of course, as we prefer, reach us on our email, Brandon@aviationmentors.com or Carson@aviationmentors.com.
And as a wrap up for the day, remember, we're here to guide you in your aviation journey. So fly safe and enjoy the ride.